This is Taking Stock on Bloomberg. I'm Pim Fox. Now, Brazil has been gaining a lot of attention as the emerging market to watch. Even the Olympic Committee is paying attention, selecting Rio de Janeiro to host the 2016 Olympics. So should you be ahead of the Olympics? Should you be investing in Brazil? My guest from Stern, AG and Leach analyst Larry Di Maria and Director of Global Industrial Infrastructure. I didn't know you had that big title. Nick Heyman of Stern AG. He's one of the, the oldest and largest privately held financial services firm in the country. All right, you've just recently done a fact-finding mission, gentlemen, in Brazil. You're just back, besides all the great food and the great sights. Nick Heyman, what'd you see in Brazil? Is the economy really booming there?
Yeah, it is. It is really doing well. And I guess if we got any one bottom line takeaway, that as much as people fear that China, could be a contingency, China really plays a pretty small part. And more importantly, in addition to mining, in addition to agriculture, in addition to oil and gas for the pre-salt development of their oil fields offshore, now construction is about to take off.
Infrastructure spending.
Construction infrastructure, but I'm talking about municipal, and I'm talking about public, and we're certainly talking about residential. There's 7.2 million home shortfall in the country, as well as commercial. And so, this is kind of the fourth leg, if you will. And all of the management that we met with certainly were upgrading their company's CEOs, CFOs. There's certainly labor shortage, so that was pushing more investments into automation. But it's a fascinating time. So
it's not just the export economy. I mean, this is really a domestic story. Larry, what about the notion that these companies, they're going to be spending money, but as Nick was saying, in infrastructure, in construction projects? Where's the money going to come from?
The money comes from a variety of sources. You have FDI with $35 billion. Should be $35 billion
Foreign
this year.
direct investment?
That's correct. Going up to $40 billion and growing over the next several years, growing annually. The BNDES is a major government institution which allocates capital. You have a guiding hand economy, so to speak. And the BNDES really allocates capital across a variety of sectors, most notably infrastructure and public housing and other sectors. So you have quite a bit of money that flowed through the BNDES, also through Banco do Brasil, which makes its way over to agriculture and other areas. You have private investment, public investment, and as Nick mentioned, some of the real tailwinds, the Olympics, World Cup. You have literally a 600 billion real tailwind over the next 5 years of money that will be spent on major infrastructure projects, above and beyond, aside from any of the domestic stories.
This sounds a lot like what China did in its run-up to the Olympic Games, Nick Heyman. What about the agriculture sector? You mentioned that specifically. What kinds of companies are going to benefit? Tractor supply companies as well as other, farm implements?
Yeah, no, Larry's our lead on ag, in the firm, but definitely the equipment manufacturers, seed, fertilizer are going to be big factors as well. But what people were most worried about was that the huge surge in the recovery of the ag sector this year, which has occurred, which might be up 60, or more percent, was going to result in kind of a pull forward, like the cash for clunkers because of government stimulus for low-cost loans, and it end up having a significant decline. And while we came back and did lower our forecast slightly for next year, it is slightly is the right word as opposed to chasm.
So, Larry, what kind of stocks should we be looking for if we're interested in benefiting from the agriculture sector?
Well, there's different ways to play the agriculture sector. For one thing, fertilizer imports this year, after skipping a couple of years, you're going to have record imports of fertilizer into Brazil this year, which should help the crops, naturally. But you can play either the land and producer guys, because there's the companies SLC Agricola and Brazil Agro, which are land plays, but also production plays. They farm soybeans, cotton, and corn. And you also can play you can play Cozan for sugarcane.
We're going to talk more about what's happening in Brazil. We've got more with Larry Di Maria, more with Nick Heyman. Also, we're going to take another look at a key emerging market. Yes, China. Opportunities in the country's mobile phone market. Next. This is Taking Stock on Bloomberg. I'm Pim Fox. Coming up tonight on Charlie Rose. Ever wish you'd done a semester abroad? How about a year in Abu Dhabi? Charlie talks with New York University President John Sexton about different forms of education. Charlie Rose airs weeknights at 8 and 10 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg TV and at 6 p.m. on Bloomberg Radio. Now, my guests right now are talking about opportunities in Brazil. Larry Di Maria and Nick Heyman from Stern AG Leach. They have just returned from Brazil. Larry, what about specific stocks? You mentioned Cosan. Okay, that's a sugarcane to ethanol producer in Brazil. But what about U.S. companies or companies that U.S. investors can buy that want to be invested in the agriculture sector in Brazil? How do they play that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a very favorable view of agriculture in general. Our longer-term thesis is very bullish on agriculture, and the OEMs and the equipment manufacturers are a great way to play that. So we like AGCO and we like Deere here. CNH will also benefit down in Brazil, but we got a chance to tour those factories and talk to the managements down in Brazil. And the ag sector is increasing the productivity and the mechanization. There's been government programs in place to help support the ag sector for machinery, for tractors and combines and sugarcane harvesters. And it's a great way to play the ag story in Brazil through the U.S. companies, because there's not a ton of ways to do it, but AGCO in general in particular is one great way to do it. Deere has a smaller portion of there, but a growing portion in an overall growing market over time.
All right, so AGCO, I know they're based in Georgia, and then Deere also for a play in Brazil. What about the industrial sector, Nick Heyman? Where do you allocate money? How do you play industrialization in Brazil?
Well, one of the things that was really interesting, it took a mundane, kind of company that rents concrete formworks, scaffolding, aerial work platforms, and then you take and put a little expertise around the engineering on how to assist companies that are designing buildings to accelerate and enhance their safety, and suddenly you've got a company that with that engineering expertise has moved way beyond just rentals, and they're providing solutions for accelerating the pace, which there's no shortage of construction in the country. And here they got 50% of the market.
What's the company?
The company is Mills.
It's a privately held company.
Actually, this just went public 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Yeah. So it's locally listed, hasn't got to an ADR yet, but probably will be. But it's an exceptional story. The EBITDA has grown 128% right through the downturn in the last 3 years, 39% EBITDA margin, 25% return on invested capital. Their nearest competitor has a fraction of a market share point, and they've got 50% of the market. So tremendous growth, great vitality, right in the sweet spot of construction. Another one would be MDE, which is a private company, as you're mentioning, that's relatively small, just 8 years in existence, soon to do 100 million reais in sales. They design custom engineered material handling systems. They've just got a license to be a franchise for Aztec here.
That's the asphalt company, right?
Asphalt company. They're going to start selling all their equipment down in Brazil. So there is huge opportunity. Obviously, mining industry is pretty good to hook onto, construction, but there's great growth opportunities with good quality management. And these are companies that are just beginning to, if you will, bud.
All right, well, just beginning to trade, right? Mills, all right, so that's one. You mentioned AGCO and Deere. What about engine makers? I know we were talking about Cummins. Is that a good way to play Brazil?
Cummins is a terrific company, one of the best operations we've probably seen down there from a U.S. company. It's a great way to play Brazil. They make truck engines. There's a fleet of 1.8 million trucks in Brazil that turns over every year. Part of it turns over, a few percent turns over. You have new emission standards coming in 2012, which will drive a pre-buy probably next year. So you have a very good tailwind for Cummins over the next couple of years. And they've been there for 50 years. They have great distribution. They have a great filter business, which is great margins. And they have the truck engine business, which is doing exceptionally well.
All right, so we've got agriculture, we've got industrial, we've got engines. What about they've got to be having railroads that expand there. What about the railroad business?
Sure. There's a couple other ways to play industrial in Brazil with the local companies. One would be a company called ALL, All America Latina Logistica, which essentially has a dominant market position in Brazil for transporting grains. They transport about 2/3 of their transport is grains, 1/3 industrial, and they have a monopoly in the area which they operate. They own the concession.
Having a monopoly, I heard that was a good thing in some businesses anyway.
Government sanctioned.
And it's allowed there. So they're doing very, very well. And I think over time they'll probably also expand on part of their network out to the center west to probably exploit some of the unexploited mines that are viable mines but need to get better logistics out of the country. country. So there's some great story at ALL to grow over time, too, as well as some other industrial companies.
All right. I want to thank you, gentlemen, very much sharing your recent trip to Brazil with us, whether it be Mills or whether it be AGCO, Deere, or indeed ALL. Appreciate
and VEG is a great company as well.
Sorry?
And VEG is a great company as well.
WEG.
Yes.
All right, we're going to have you on in the future to give us more details there. Thank you very much for that insight into Brazil. All right, still ahead, we're going to dial into China's mobile market. We've got a CEO sit-down with Rick Look. He is the head of Jingwei International. Find out why their company's software could change the way China's mobile industry works.